From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! We're on the road in Park City, Utah at the Sundance Film Festival.
When someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. What it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what black people have gone through, what black people have experienced in this country since the time the first black person was kidnapped from the shores of Africa.
Angela Davis, the rare archival footage, is part of a new documentary called The Black Power Mixtape, 1967 to 1975. The trove of film was found in the basement of Swedish public television. It features some of the leading figures of the Black Power movement, including Stokely Carmichael, Huey P. Newton, and others. Also, rare footage of Dr. Martin Luther King, with Harry Belafonte meeting with the King of Sweden. We'll speak with the co-producer of the film, actor and activist Danny Glover.
Chrissy, does it belong to? You know, and that's the fundamental question here. And once we begin to tackle that and struggle against that, we have a chance, you know, because the powers that be are going to find every way to undermine it, to subvert it.
But first, the Palestine Papers. Newly released documents show Palestinian negotiators secretly agreed to give up large tracts of West Bank land and most of East Jerusalem in peace talks with the Israeli government. It's being called the biggest leak of confidential documents in the history of the Middle East conflict. We'll speak with Columbia University professor Rashid Khalidi. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're in Park City, Utah. The attorney for alleged Army whistleblower Bradley Manning's accusing the military of intensifying its harsh treatment of Manning as he remains behind bars. The lawyer, David Combs, says Manning was placed on a stricter suicide watch last week, despite psychiatric reviews showing he's not a suicide risk and should even be taken off a less restrictive prevention of injury watch. According to Combs, the military revoked Manning's lone hour of exercise and stripped him of all his clothing except his underwear. Manning was ultimately returned to prevention of injury status after Combs complained. The military is also cracking down on his visitors. On Sunday, Manning's friend David House and progressive blogger James Hampshire were both detained and prevented from visiting Manning at the Quantico military base in Virginia. They'd brought with them a 42,000 signature petition criticizing Manning's prison conditions. House has publicly alleged Manning's mental and physical health has declined under 23-hour-a-day solitary confinement. The pair were detained for 2 hours and released only after Manning's allotted visitation period expired. Former Chicago Police Commander John Burge has been sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for obstruction of justice and lying about torturing prisoners into making confessions. Burge was convicted in June following longtime accusations of overseeing the systematic torture of more than 100 African-American men. The police department fired him in 1993 for mistreatment of a suspect, but did not press charges. Burge was ultimately indicted in 2007, not for the torture he oversaw, but for lying about it. After the verdict, victims of torture under Burge, as well as prisoners' families members, denounced the sentence as a slap on the wrist.
This is a complete injustice. 4.5 years where men have spent 20 and 30 years in prison is outrageous.
Burge gets 4 years, 5 years, and he goes home. That's not right. My brother spent 16 years on death row for something he didn't do.
John Burge will begin serving his jail sentence in March. President Obama has publicly introduced General Electric CEO Jeffrey Immelt as his new top economic advisor. Immelt will head the newly formed President's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness, which takes the place of the Economic Recovery Advisory Board led by Paul Volcker. On Friday, Obama said Immelt would drive the administration's stated goal of creating jobs.
Our job is to do everything we can to ensure that businesses can take root and folks can find good jobs, and America is leading the global competition that will determine our success in the 21st century. And so now, to help fulfill this new mission, I'm assembling a new group of business leaders and outside advisors. And I am so proud and pleased that Jeff has agreed to chair this panel, my Council on Jobs and Competitiveness, because we think GE has something to teach businesses all across America.
GE CEO Jeffrey Immelt's appointment has come under scrutiny on multiple fronts. He'll retain his position at the helm of GE, creating a potential conflict of interest. As one of the nation's largest corporations, GE has a variety of business and issues before the federal government, including media mergers, military sales, environmental cleanup, and a $16.1 billion bailout in 2008. And while Obama has touted Immelt's mission to create jobs, the United Electrical Workers Union says GE has closed 29 plants in the United States in the past 2 years, laying off around 3,000 workers. Arizona Congress member Gabrielle Giffords was transferred to a Houston rehabilitation facility Friday, less than 2 weeks after she was critically wounded in the Tucson shooting rampage. Giffords' new doctor, Gerard Francisco of Memorial Hermann Hospital, reported on her progress.
She surprised us. She did not need as much assistance as we had anticipated. There were still people holding on to her, as was described previously, but she's activating her muscles even more than what I had anticipated. At one point, her leg was dangling in the bed, and we asked her to bring her leg up. After a couple of seconds, she brought the left leg up without any further delay.
Newly released documents show Palestinian negotiators have agreed to give up large tracts of West Bank land in peace talks with the Israeli government. The disclosure is among many contained in what's being called the Palestine Papers, over 1,700 files from Israeli-Palestinian negotiations dating back to 1999. The news network Al Jazeera began publishing details of the papers on Sunday. Minutes from a 2008 meeting indicate Palestinian negotiators offered to allow Israel's annexation of almost all of East Jerusalem. Al Jazeera says forthcoming documents will reveal new details about compromises the Palestinian Authority was prepared to make on refugees and the right of return, as well as on the PA's security cooperation with Israel and its correspondence on the UN inquiry into the late 2008 attack on the Gaza Strip. Palestinian Authority officials have challenged the documents' veracity. Chief negotiator Saeb Erekat called them, quote, a pack of lies. The documents release comes as an Israeli government inquiry has absolved its political leadership and military of any wrongdoing in the deadly attack on a Gaza-bound aid flotilla last year. 9 people were killed, including a U.S. citizen, when Israeli troops stormed the Mavi Marmara ship on May 31st. Inquiry Chair Jacob Turkel unveiled the panel's decision.
The Commission's conclusion is that the imposition of the naval blockade over the Gaza Strip was lawful and complies with international law, considering Israel's security concerns and its efforts to fulfill humanitarian obligations. This Commission's conclusion is that the entire action taken by Israel on May 31, 2010, to enforce the naval blockade, despite a small number of incidents in which force was used, and their details are still not fully clear, were legal and in accordance with the international law.
We'll have more on the flotilla inquiry and the Palestine Papers after headlines. We'll be speaking with Columbia University professor Rashid Khalidi. Thousands of people have rallied in northwestern Pakistan to protest ongoing U.S. drone attacks that have killed scores of civilians. On Sunday, demonstrators in the city of Peshawar blocked a main road and held a vigil to mourn the victims of drone bombings. According to Agence France-Presse, U.S. drone attacks doubled in the North Waziristan region last year. Over 100 drone strikes killed more than 670 people. At least 13 people were killed in 3 recent attacks. Protests continue in Tunisia against the interim government formed after the overthrow of President Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali earlier this month. Hundreds of people defied a curfew in the capital of Tunis on Sunday to camp outside the office of interim Prime Minister Mohamed Ghannouchi. Opposition activists want him and other officials who served under Ben Ali to resign. The interim government has pledged to release political prisoners and has placed 2 top Ben Ali advisors under house arrest. In a new milestone for the Tunisian opposition, thousands of police officers, army service members, and government workers rallied in the capital Saturday in a show of solidarity with the protests that ousted Ben Ali.
I'm very happy with Tunisia today. Tunisia, which is teaching the world the meaning of democracy. And the police here are not police. The police are our brothers, and we are united.
More protests have erupted across the Middle East in the aftermath of the Tunisia uprising. On Saturday, thousands of people rallied in Yemen to demand the resignation of President Ali Abdullah Saleh. The protest was confined to the campus of the University of Sana'a, avoiding a street confrontation with Yemeni forces. Meanwhile, in Algeria, protesters clashed with government forces in a bold defiance of a ban on public gatherings. Opposition leaders say around 40 people were wounded. Former Haitian dictator Jean-Claude Duvalier has appealed for public sympathy amidst corruption charges and human rights investigations since his recent return to Haiti. Known as Baby Doc Duvalier returned to Haiti this month, 25 years after a popular uprising forced him into exile. On Friday, Duvalier said he feels sadness for those he says are recognized as victims of his government.
I take this opportunity to express again, one more time, my deepest sadness towards my compatriots who are recognized as being victims under my government.
While Duvalier claims he's come back to help Haiti rebuild, critics say he's making a last-ditch attempt to recoup some $6 million in a frozen Swiss bank account. A Swedish law passed in response to Duvalier's long-term attempt to withdraw the funds kicks in next month. Duvalier would only be able to evade it by entering and leaving Haiti without prosecution. That's a Swiss law. A Philadelphia abortion doctor has been arrested on charges of murder and performing illegal abortions that caused the deaths of 7 babies and a patient. Dr. Kermit Gosnell was arrested last week along with his wife and 8 unlicensed employees. A grand jury report accuses Gosnell of regularly and illegally delivering live babies in the 3rd trimester, then murdering the newborns by severing their spinal cords with scissors. Gosnell and his staff are also accused of killing a pregnant mother by providing her with too much anesthesia. The grand jury report also singles out Pennsylvania health and medical regulators for ignoring complaints against the clinic dating back to 1993. State officials are said to have deliberately avoided enforcement of laws mandating that abortion clinics provide the same level of care as other medical providers. Gosnell is believed to have earned at least $1.8 million a year for his practice, mostly in payments from low-income women of color. The U.S. death penalty system has been dealt a major setback following a drug company's decision to no longer produce an anesthetic used in most states' lethal injections. On Friday, the Illinois-based Hospira said it would comply with an Italian government request that it not produce sodium thiopental at its Milan area plant. Italy does not practice capital punishment. The decision will force states to find an alternative drug and potentially modify regulations, a process that could prove both lengthy and expensive. And in media news, MSNBC host Keith Olbermann has left the network after 8 years. On Friday, Olbermann ended his nightly countdown broadcast with the announcement it would be his last. Although he did not specify a reason, Olbermann's departure came just after the Justice Department gave final approval to media giant Comcast's takeover of MSNBC's parent company, NBC Universal. Keith Olbermann was briefly suspended in November after it was revealed that he had donated money to 3 Democratic candidates, including Arizona Congressmember Gabrielle Giffords. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Park City, Utah.